So you're still getting chills, even though the energy and the tone is trying to be high. That conflict was so good. And hello.
Hi.
Good morning.
How you doing?
It's my birthday tomorrow, so I'm just looking forward to playing video games all weekend. A very good week.
It started, I guess the journey of this week is all about adding, kind of rearranging the horror elements of the movie and of the game, rethinking it after watching a couple of horror movies, in particular Noroi, which is from 2005, and we really loved that.
Japanese found footage, such a fabulous mix of tone.
Yeah, because it uses footage from a lot of other Japanese TV. It uses those formats, so it's got like a panel TV kind of interest
variety
story, variety game show, like a couple of just interview recordings from elsewhere, like really put them together really nicely, which made it good because the tone was quite, and a comedy show as well, made for good variety of tone, like you said.
I think my biggest, and I'll try not to ramble too long about it, but my favorite thing was in one of those variety show moments, watching these there's a panel of comedians doing certain things, and you're watching them on this show, and the energy is high, scary stuff is happening, they are being, the panel themselves are being, I don't know what's going on, and trying to keep the energy high, but the audience knows that what's happening isn't good. So you're still getting chills, even though the energy and the tone is trying to be high. That conflict was so good and absolutely not what horror movies do much of at the moment. When it's like, well, no, if it's scary, everything has to be scary. All the signifiers need to be scary. The characters are your cipher, they're scared. I loved it. That was really, really satisfying and really interesting to experience of I'm having a good time and I'm kind of giggling with them, but the hair on my leg is standing up. I think it got me thinking more about the freedom of variety of tones, and I think that led me to think about when I was still working on this vertical slice bit to try and get a sequence from the game existing to see how it feels to play. And I was working on what we've just been calling the ways between, which is like a void, nothing, cursed space. And it had been nothing, which is great it had been like a desert with some shapes in it or something, or black and misty and stuff like that, which is really good for scope. But I hadn't found that concept particularly inspiring, or I couldn't really see it. It didn't feel like our concept. And then I don't even know where that came from.
I think, I was thinking about the pastiche of TV and the use of that in Noroi, and it got me thinking about the TVSN element that we wanted to bring into Janet de Mornay, and how she was big in the past, so she was big in the 90s maybe, and then that got me thinking about shopping centres and things because I love a creepy.
Is it your idea?
Yeah, I think so, because I brought up Pack Fair to you the morning.
Yeah, I thought I said shopping centre. I thought you said Pack Fair. Anyway, it doesn't really matter whose idea it was.
No, it doesn't really. I can't remember. But yeah, Pacific Fair, which for non-Australian viewers is like a massive mall that was
Queensland
huge.
Viewers.
Yeah, non-Queensland. A big mall on the Gold Coast, shopping centre. It was modelled after Disneyland in a weird way. So it's got lots of toys and rides and themed sections and stuff, which in Australia was a huge novelty back in the day. So Pete was watching videos on YouTube.
And so that suddenly the idea and the tone of that, the weirdness of that, of this skeletal shopping centre in this magical void between space just felt tonally exactly right.
Because you get your big parking lot too. You love a parking lot.
Love a parking lot, a big Aussie parking lot with the sun just burning the shit out of you as you're just desperate to get off the bitumen.
Yeah.
That's Australian culture right there. It just suddenly clicked, and while not the most scope effective of solutions, I think was tonally and subject wise just perfect.
So Pete you were spending the week putting that together, and you put it together really quickly as well. It came
I
together
did.
so well.
So I kind of grey boxed that up. I know car parks very well, so that wasn't super hard to jam together.
And the escalators, they're
And
beautiful.
they're meant to be one of the hardest things in video games to program. The trick is, you go to the assets store and find someone who made a generator for rigid body escalators, and it works fine. And so I finished off, also because you'd been working so diligently on this main bedroom for the vertical slice, and really decorating it up and getting that filled out with assets and objects. And so the puzzle stuff that I've worked on, I finally could replace the temporary assets with the actual assets in the room. And so that started it just suddenly felt very real. And then that moves into this way between space for what was a boss encounter, is now no longer a boss encounter, but is now like the same puzzle again, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And so I kind of built that out as well. And then I'd finished that. I'm like, I'll play it through. So playing it through, giving it some testing, see how much of it was broken. Not much. And even though this felt to me like a really simplified version of some of the other things I planned out, even I, who knows the solution, got it wrong once or twice. And it was really satisfying also realizing just how much a memory game, when you've got 4 things to remember, that's kind of hard enough.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want it to be a punish.
No, and when you're in a space where you're being distracted by lots of stuff,
Yeah.
like there's lots to look at, there's lots to listen to and like have experience, it is,
And so playing through that,
job.
realizing that we're not making The Witness. I don't want people to be stuck on puzzles for hours. We've got a story to tell. And so just the fact that worked and was simple also meant it was simpler to execute than any of the plans that I had earlier. Really satisfying, very pleasing to play through. And then you played through as well.
On the Friday, just yesterday, and it was so smooth. It was a real pleasure.
He liked it.
Yeah. It was good, and I had a good breakthrough as well the day before that, because I've been struggling with the paper mache stuff. As if you watch the previous episodes, I bring it up every week. I'm like, it's not scary enough, it's not this, it's not that. But I had a breakthrough Thursday, which was good because that was a frustrating day. Even as we were walking into the office that morning, we were kind of having like little tense back and forths about, because I was worried about the scope creep of this new mall,
the new shopping center.
I was just like, that's a whole new world we're gonna build. This is scope creep happening in real time, isn't it?
And I was like, it feels like when I think something doesn't work and I find a solution, it's scope creep. If you say something doesn't work and we have to change it, that's solving a problem. And I go, it was like 50% being shady, but definitely coming from something that I was feeling.
Yeah.
So that's
ongoing.
That was a conversation.
Yeah. And then it just carried on, I think. Because you were putting together the puzzle itself and you were using the paper mache stuff, and I just I was working away on the house in the room, and I kind of just had this comment. I'm like, but like they'll change because I still haven't decided on the paper mache. I'm still working on that, as you know. And there was just this tense kind of
I was like,
silence.
But why am I building out a full puzzle involving this paper mache if the whole thing's going to be scrapped and started again? This is what Queer Man Peering was repeatedly.
Yeah. So we kind of went our separate ways for a little bit, and then we had lunch out at a restaurant. And we so rarely have tense conversations in public spaces. Like, you didn't even think about it, but like there were 2 couples on either side. But yeah, we got quite heated.
I was not backing down.
No, you weren't backing down, because I was like feeling frustrated, because I was like, you're like saying these paper mache are locked off when it's like we never had like pre-production and locked anything off, and we were still kind of, this was still being discussed. As I've said in every single week, like I'm having trouble with the paper mache. It's taking a while to get them sufficiently scary, sufficiently XYZ.
And I was like, I thought it had always been in the context of the poster, not necessarily this way between space. It's like, I hadn't even occurred to me that you're also talking about these things in this scene. And I feel like you're currently getting upset at me because I'm frustrated that I'm gonna have to do this whole thing again. And somehow I should apologize for having to do my job twice because you've changed your mind? Why am I apologizing for you because you're making my job harder? It
just became a tangle of stuff. But it was, yeah, it's about finding that balance where it's like, I know you were traumatized rightfully from Queer Man Peering, that's fair, because that was a mess and a nightmare in lots of ways, but we're taking steps, and it's much better this time around.
Absolutely.
But also, we haven't had pre-production, so things are going to change.
Well, this kind of is still pre-production.
Yeah, this is like, and it's like, I was just taken aback because I'm like, we've only been working on it for 2 months and we are doing so incredibly, one and a half months or something, and we're doing incredibly well. And I was just feeling rushed because I'm like, I'm doing the house, I'm doing the paper mache, I'm doing character design, and it's like, I'm meant to be locking them off as well. It's like, like I can't do all of that at that speed. No one can. Anyway, not to harp on about it, we kind of, oh gosh, because then even after that, when I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to this corner of the house and I'm just gonna mind my own business and stay out of the way and just move some frames around. You like leant over from your computer and you were like, oh, that's the corner I'm working in. And I was just like, I can't do anything today.
Yeah, because you moved around other things that I'd just finished locking off for the other puzzle. But also, it wasn't a big deal.
No, but it was just this snowballing of like, I can't, like everything, like we were just stepping on each other's toes that day. So I was very much just like, I'm just gonna go into another room and potter around in this different digital room and just leave me alone. And then I went back to paper mache that afternoon because I'm like, well, if you want these paper mache sorted out, then I'll go and sort them out for you. Then I'll get it done. But that was a challenge, obviously, because it's not the best headspace in which to try and create something.
No.
But I did have a breakthrough in the end. I was kind of like, because I kept trying to make them cute and in that almost like Takashi Murakami kind of way, or scary anime thing where it's like, or Akira where it's like, oh, it's a cute like bunny thing, but it's got giant teeth or 2 heads or, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I really want that. But it wasn't going anywhere, and I was like, oh, that's because that's not what Janet would make or do.
No, this is kind of, it was going too kawaii, which is not
it's not Janet.
White woman in Australia with lots of money.
No,
aesthetic.
I mean, it could be, like, I don't want to limit like the weirdness of human nature, because it's a thing, and stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have
happened. But for her, it just wasn't clicking, so I'm like, oh yeah, she would be practical. She would be making, like, homewares that then she can sell on TVSN. Because it's not just a haunted charm, it's also a bowl.
Finger bowl.
A finger bowl. It's also,
a key rack.
A hat hook. Yeah, it's all these things. And that was really good. So immediately when I started approaching it from that way, and it had a bit more structure, it really clicked. They had a purpose, they had like a clear background of things I could reference, rather than just this nebulous, nothing space, sculpture space, as I mentioned previously. It really worked. So that was very satisfying. And I think that's not going to change again, which is great. What's next week, Pete? Oh, did we mention? Yeah, we mentioned Agnes, we mentioned Melbourne. What else is coming up next week?
We found out that Queer Man Peering was an honorary mention for excellence in art at the Actors. Yes. That was lovely.
Yeah, it's great.
Also found out that we are selected to be on the Acme Audience Choice category, which is like 2 days of lovely news after that original lovely news from Agnes. So that's just, I love it. I love it a lot. What's this week? Well, this weekend is me playing Scarlet Nexus. That's all I can think about right now.